Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu alaikum students. I am Shahid Majid. This is class 10th subject mathematics chapter number 1 and today is our lecture number 1. In lecture number 1 we discuss the quadratic equation. What is quadratic equation? What is its general form? What is its definition? What is pure quadratic equation? And we discuss some question related to the quadratic equation. And we also discuss what are the methods by using them we solve the quadratic equation. Okay, so first of all we will start with the definition of the quadratic equation. So I write at here definition of the quadratic equation. Okay, so the first equation is an equation which contain the square of the unknown you can also call it variable. We will discuss it. Variable quantity, but no higher power is called quadratic equation. Or an equation of the second degree. Why we call it second degree? We discuss why we call it a second degree equation. Second degree. So this is basically the definition of the quadratic equation. So this is basically the quadratic equation and second degree. Now we discuss its general form, or we call it a standard form. General, or also we call it a standard form of a quadratic equation. A second degree equation, in one variable, for example we call it x. You can say x, y, z, whatever you want, but in the books x is used. That's why I am using it here x. Of the form. Okay, now I'm going to write the general form, or we can say standard form of the quadratic equation. A x square plus b x plus c is equal to 0, where a not is equal to 0. Why a not is equal to 0? I am telling you. And a, b and c are real numbers. Okay, students, we discuss at here equation which contain the square of the unknown variable. So student, here we unknown variable is x. Because we don't know the value of that. When we solve the question, we will see find out the value of the x by different methods. Okay, students. So here we discuss second degree. If you look at the student at here, the most power of the equation is 2. The highest power of the equation is 2. So that's why we call it a second degree equation. Okay, students. and I'm right here, a not is equal to 0. So it means a must be not is equal to 0, because if a is equal to 0, then this whole term become is equal to 0. It means we move to the power 1. So then this equation not become a second equation, but it become a linear equation. Linear equation, such equation which variable power have a 1. So that's why we call it a must be not is equal to 0. The term with scale must be exist. Okay students, so this is first of all we discuss the definition of the equation, and then we discuss the standard general or standard form of the equation. Now we move to discuss some different example of the quadratic equation. So we take different examples. For example, let's say I take x square minus 7x plus 6 is equal to 0. Okay students, and another one, for example, I take 3x square plus 4x is equal to 5 is equal to 5. You can also write this equation as 3x square plus 4x minus 5 is equal to 0. Okay, so now basically we write in the previous page. For example, we have standard form of the quadratic equation is ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Student, here a and b is called coefficient of x square and x. The coefficient of x square is a, the coefficient of x is b. Why we call it a, b, or coefficient? Coefficient is a thing, basically a number right with the variable is called coefficient. For example, here x square, this is variable unknown, and so that is why a is called coefficient. For example, here bx, this is unknown variable, so that is b is called variable. For example, here is c. If we look at with the c, we have no variable. Here we have no variable, so we not call it c is a variable, we call it a constant. So simply if anything written with the variable is called coefficient, and without variable any number is called constant. Okay students, now further type of the quadratic equation is we call it a pure quadratic equation. Pure quadratic equation. So we know that the quadratic equation expression is ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Okay student, if b is equal to 0, in the, for example, in equation 1, it is called pure quadratic equation. Pure quadratic equation. Pure quadratic equation is what? If we have a general expression, or we can say it's a standard notation of the quadratic equation. If the coefficient of the x become is equal to 0, for example b is equal to 0, we call it, such equation call it a pure quadratic equation. Okay, so now for example, let's say we take few examples. Let's say examples are any take. For example, x square minus 16 is equal to 0. If you look here, a is equal to 1, b is equal to 0, and c is equal to minus 16. Okay, I take another example. For example, 4x square is equal to 7. We can also write it like 4x square minus 7 is equal to 0. Here a is equal to 4, b is equal to 0, and c is equal to minus 7. If you look in both equation, you find out what? B is equal to 0. So such quadratic equation in which the coefficient of the x is equal to 0 is called pure quadratic equation. Okay student, this is all for today, the lecture number 1.